Let me set the scene with some macroeconomics data. If we can run the presentation. So, as you know, IMF has just released the new estimates for GDP growth in worldwide, and in particular for this region. As we see, the growth trend of GDP in the region is a healthy one, and Romania is leading the pack. One of the reasons why it's leading the pack, or the main reasons why it's leading the pack, is because there have been pro-cyclical fiscal measures in the past few years in the country, with the lowering of direct and indirect taxation and an increase of public wages and minimum wages, and that has boosted consumption. So the growth model of Romania, as of now, is a consumption-driven model. What is the baseline? Well, let's look at the GDP on the left side of this chart, and the GDP per capita on a PPP basis on the right side of the chart. Again, Romania leads the pack with about $440 billion, again, on a PPP basis. And also in terms of GDP per capita, with the only exception of Greece, Romania is a leader in the region. Where we have a bit of a source of concern is actually in terms of budget deficit in these countries. With the only exception of Bulgaria, all these countries are in budget deficit. Some of them, with cases like Montenegro and Greece, obviously, but also Romania, are approaching or are over the 3% budget deficit threshold. Romania will probably not be above that level this year, but there are concerns about the performance next year, again, due to the pro-cyclical fiscal measures that have been put in place by successive administration in the countries. That said, public debt, again, with the notable exception of Greece, is under control. One consideration, though, most of these countries have a massive infrastructural gap. Romania has a proverbially massive infrastructural gap. And so we should expect in the years to come, hopefully, also substantial investment flow in public investment flow in infrastructure to bridge that gap. So I would expect the data about public debt to change over the next years. In terms of current account balance, again, with the exception of Bulgaria, which has a positive account balance, all these countries are in a current account deficit, and that again it could become a source of concern in case of external shocks in the countries. I would stop here. I would just give you a couple of indications of what EBRD is trying to do in the region, and which is the footprint of EBRD in the region. We have cumulated investment of about 23 billion euros in Southeastern Europe, with more than 1,100 operations. The current portfolio is of about 9 billion euros, with about 500 operations. And we have a business volume year over year of about 2.1 billion euros on 100 operations. In Romania, in particular, we have invested 7.5 billion euros since our inception on 400 operations. We have currently a portfolio of 1.6 billion euros in 160 operations, and we invest around 400 million euros per year. The sectorial distribution of our investment is actually fairly balanced. We invest 20% of our funds in energy, 20% in the corporate sector, about 24% in the financial institution sector, and the rest, about 37%, in the infrastructural sector on a regional basis. For us, the strategic priorities, in particular in Romania, are hinged on three pillars. The first one is the broadening access to finance, in particular for SMEs, by inducing lending, bank lending, but also by diversifying sources of finance with non-banking financial institutions, factoring companies, leasing companies, equity, so private equity, and access to capital markets. We are also a shareholder in the Bucharest Stock Exchange. The third pillar is the development of commercialized infrastructure. And the third pillar is the enhancement of competitiveness of the corporate sector through direct financing and advisory services in order to improve corporate governance and management practices. Now I really would stop here, and I would put the first question to the panel, and the question is for all of you. And if you can distill in a few words, which is your SWOT analysis about the position of Romania as a regional hub, and if you see any other country that could challenge that leadership. Jonas, maybe you want to start, because you also have some data that
Yes.
you may want to project. Do
Yes.
you want to come over here?
Yeah, yeah. Good morning. I would just go you through some numbers in addition to what Matteo has presented. You will see that we begin the same, but I will put a different touch on it, a touch of a consultant, not the touch of a banker that works with exact and clear numbers. I just want to show you some trends that I think would be relevant for you to see where is Romania compared to the countries in our region. So if we talk of Southeast Europe at a glance, then it's important for you to know that it's a market with 55 million consumers. The total GDP created in this market is about 430 billion as of 2016 estimates, of which Romania has 44%. Now, the interesting part is in our region, 11 countries, we have 4 countries who are member of EU, 4 countries that are EU candidates, and we have 3 more countries that are in different stages of EU accession. For example, Moldova signed the pre-accession agreement. Now, when it comes to the GDP growth, we used average. We were not, so without speaking to Matteo, we actually complement each other. What I wanted to draw your attention is that in average, Romania is the second performer in the cluster, while Macedonia is number 1, 4.5 in average. Romania is around 3.9 for the last 3 years. Now, what is interesting, and I want to show you about, is the GDP per capita, which I believe you'll find very interesting. It will take another 40 years for Romania with this growth rate to reach the average of European Union. What does it mean? And if you look at Romania, look at the columns on the right side where you can see the compounded annual growth rate. Romania for the period 95, I'm sorry, just to make sure. Yeah, 95 to 2016, Romania was the 4th highest growth GDP, had the highest growth GDP per capita rate in an average of 9.9%. If you take only the period 2011-2016, Romania ranked 3rd with 5.4% growth of the GDP per capita. And for the last 2 years, Romania ranks 1st as a growth of the GDP per capita with an average of 6.5. But again, the reality is that not only for Romania, all other countries in our region, Croatia, Bulgaria, less of Slovenia, we have a lot to catch up in terms of GDP per capita, but which also speaks about the potential our region has in terms of economic development for the 10 years to come. Now, in terms of foreign direct investments, the year 2008 was the peak for the Romanian economy with $9.5 billion US, while the 2011 was the worst of all years with only 1.8 million. The good news is that this foreign direct investments is on a positive trend, reaching an estimated of $4.5 billion in 2016. What about our potential? Well, when it comes to the world trade market, the total trade, imports of goods and services is around 180 billion in our cluster. And we have exports of around 140 billion. As you can see, Romania is the biggest in the region with the 66.5 billion imports and only 56 exports. So there is a trade deficit that you are well aware of. The only country that has a positive trade trade balance is Slovenia, slightly. They have imports of 20.5 million, exports of 20.6. All others having trade deficits. If we look at the competitiveness index, how competitive our countries are in a study done by an institute in Switzerland, it appears that Slovenia is best positioned, 43rd ranked, followed by Bulgaria, 49, Romania, 50 place, Croatia, 59. So as you can see, Croatia, Bulgaria, Romania are more or less concentrated around the same topic. Now, you may say, well, that is good. Depends to what you compare, because this study was done for 63 countries. So within those 63 countries, Romania is the 50th. Now, is it that competitive? Well, hard to say, but there is one thing important to mention. It is a significant improvement compared to the last 3 years. Now, to look on the bright side, though, it's another statistics about the report done by World Bank, Doing Business report, which PwC contributes to. In this report, you see that Romania in the cluster is ranked on the 3rd position, being on the place 36 in easy of doing business and place 50 on easy of paying taxes. How is this? Is it good? Is it bad? Well, at a cluster level, yes, it's good. At the global level, the answer, yes, is good, because this study is done for 189 countries. So if you look, with the exception of, I would say, Kosovo, Bosnia, Herzegovina, all the countries in our region will be in the third part of the rank. Romania is doing well, I would say, in easy of doing business, though with this VAT procedure for getting the VAT certificate, not many of you can say that. What are the most attractive economy sectors in our region? This would be energy and oil and gas, IT. In Romania, IT is 6% of the GDP and estimate to generate 12% of GDP in the next 5 to 10 years. Automotive, infrastructure project, agriculture, defense and army procurement. You know this is fueled by the commitment, for example, in Romania to spend 2% of the GDP for defense. And the last, but I may skip this one, Matteo, so to have as a source, I can only pinpoint 3 things. In terms of strengths of Romania, I think you well know Romania is the gate for doing business with Middle East, with CIS countries, Turkey. Has 2 big projects, Black Gateway, to transform Constanța in a secondary port for Europe, but as well as Laser Valley, the project that should be or could be developed around the laser in Măgurele, multi-billion project that could really enhance the potential for development of Romania in the next decade. Skilled labor force, and last but not least, the fact that it's still a competitive tax rate country. Now, what are the weaknesses? And I will just mention them without detailing. Weak infrastructure. Yes, there are money, but there are not projects available to absorb the funds available. And the biggest problem of Romania, and I would dare to say also in the cluster, is the availability of workforce. What EU did for us, bringing availability of funds, 20 billion euros available for our cluster, it's actually, if you want, put endangered by the fact that our workforce actually migrates in European Union. It's very hard to find now people, and the demographic doesn't help at all. That would be my presentation. And just to say a bit about PwC, we are present in all these 11 countries. We have more than 1,300 employees, and we cover all services from tax, assurance, cybersecurity, as well as advisory services. I stop here, and I thank you very much, Matteo. Hand to you the stick.
You can leave it there. Thank you. I'm going to stay here. Thanks very much, Jonas, for this data. George, do you want to add some anecdotal experience to this data and translate this data in the day-by-day reality?
With pleasure. First of all, let me clarify that I will speak as a person that Came here 20 years ago, and we took over an office with 3 people, and we grew to the organization that Matteo described before today, being headquartered in Romania, being based in Romania and expanding from Romania, from Bucharest, throughout Southeast Europe, including Greece, by the way, which is not part of Ionuț's region, but many people and many companies see nowadays Greece also as part of Southeast Europe. Absolutely. And can see Greek operation run by Romanian people. So if I try to make a checklist of a few things, number 1 would be NATO and EU. 20 years ago, those were dreams. And the people that we were living here and were doing business here were dreaming of a Romania that would be part of those 2 structures. So the fact that nowadays Romania is part of those 2 international solid structure may sound as a given fact, but 20 years ago it was a vision, and it was very important. So nowadays we have it, it's there, and it's a fact. Number 2, it's the critical mass. We have 20 million population. It's by far the biggest country in the region. It's the 7th biggest in terms of population country in the entire Europe. So we have the big 5, we have Poland, and then Romania is next. So you have the critical mass. Once you're based somewhere, it's always important, I guess, to have some critical mass in the home market, in the home country where you're based at. So if you want to have operations in the region, why not choosing the place where the mass is big? Number 3, which is very important, sometimes we do not consider it that much, is language. The way we write Romanian and the way we speak Romanian. The best anecdote to take Matteo's pass would be, I've been in a business meeting where an Italian friend was speaking Italian. He's been here for a while, of course. He had been here for 6 months or something. He was speaking constantly Italian. A lady on the other side was speaking Romanian, and they were having a business conversation. He was understanding the basics from what the lady was saying in Romania. She was understanding, the lady was understanding the basics of what he was saying in Italian. It's not English, it's Italian, but it makes sense in the terms that you can write the language, you can read the signs, and when you drive through the country, you can understand that this is Caracal and this is Călărași. It's a different place, one from the other. And the last thing, of course, that I need to mention, given the people that I've met here and the business that we've grown, is talent. The talent of people and the resilience of people matching the culture of the West and the culture of the East. Ionuț said it in a way that, you know, you can be the gateway. I've seen it every day, people having the ability to, my colleagues nowadays are flying now to San Diego from here to talk business, and they will do well, and they will fly to Athens, they will fly to Cyprus, they will fly to Beirut, and they will have business conversation with adapting to the culture of the place. So that would be the checklist that I would use.
And these are the strengths?
Yes.
The weaknesses?
The big weakness is infrastructure, and there's a lot of things missing. But it depends how we see it. You know, we've seen the slide with those guys visiting Africa and want to sell shoes. And some people will see the problem that nobody's wearing shoes, so we will not sell shoes. And some people will see the opportunity. Yes, there are no roads. Yes, there are no schools. Yes, there are no hospitals. Let's build them.
Indeed, fully agree. Radu.
Thank you, Matteo. Being the third speaker is always a disadvantage because all the statistics have been proposed or put out on a screen, so I'm at a bit of a disadvantage. I took some notes, I'm going to ignore those. I think it's important, just so you know, so my name is Radu Florescu. I'm actually born and raised in the United States. I was born in Boston, educated in Boston. I'm half French. I came to Romania 25 years ago in '89. I didn't even speak Romanian, not a word, because my father, who's Romanian born, said, you're never going to have to worry about speaking Romanian. Lo and behold, in 2017, here I am, and I absolutely have to speak Romanian. I'm not going to go through the statistics with you. I'm going to sort of give you sort of perspective, real life. I've been based in Bucharest for a while. I'm responsible, as Matteo mentioned earlier, I'm responsible for the Southeast Europe, excluding Greece. And I think it's important to get a sort of overall perspective, because as investors, you're all here and contemplating investing in this country. And any investor wants to have the sort of peace of mind that when they're going to put in X amount of dollars, those dollars are going to be put to good use. It's going to be for a business that's going to be eventually profitable with returns. And I think that, you know, we talked about wage, the advantages of the wage rates in Romania. We talked about the infrastructure, the disadvantages of infrastructures, tax rates, what Ionuț mentioned, transport costs, which is an issue linked to the infrastructure, of course. And there's 3 words that we at the AmCham always have been pushing. That's the transparency, stability, and predictability. You as investors want to be sure that the environment in which you work in is transparent, it is stable, and it is predictable. There's a guy I spoke to who's head of a large FMCG company, American one, and he said, listen, I don't care what the tax rate is. I just want to know that the tax rates, I know what I have to pay in taxes for the next 5 or 10 years. And that's an issue, and you mentioned the VAT issues and some of the tax changes that are being proposed by the government. I think that the big stamp of approval, I think, for Romania is the fact they are an EU member state, largest population in Eastern Europe after Poland, second to Poland. They are a NATO member, which is a big advantage. So we have, I think, the stamp of approval is symbolically. I think it's very important for investors to know that aside from being an EU state, Romania is a NATO member and a very good and solid NATO member and recognized by the United States as well. So I think we can go through a lot of the advantages. I think the advantages in the macroeconomic perspective have been outlined fairly well. Some of the real life issues that we deal with businesses. I go to the judiciary, and I know a colleague of mine, Brian Jardine, spoke earlier this morning, and I'm not sure if he covered this, but it's the application of laws. The laws are on the books. They're modeled after the EU, they're modeled after international standards. The laws are on the books. The issue we have in the business community is the application laws. In many instances, not all, but in enough instances, the application of laws is viewed more of a technical application rather than the intent or spirit of these said laws. And that is due to for different motives. Sometimes you have judges who are simply not competent or don't have the background experience to make a judgment in that particular case, or simply they're afraid to take a decision. This is especially true when you're talking about a case that is against the state. So these are sort of real life issues. How we get about doing that, I know there's a program in training judges. I think there's a lot of support from the US and from the EU about getting further training for judges in the business sector, trying to address those different issues as we move forward. Those are some of the issues that we, as I said, in the judiciary. But I think what's important is with the Romanian government and a lot of these countries in Eastern Europe, they're always going to put on the piece of paper the size of the market, low wages, ease of doing business and tax rate. But the big picture issue is really about the business environment. It's adopting policies that are business environment friendly and setting the stage for that business environment. Everyone knows the famous example of Ireland in the 1990s, that came out, Ireland after a relatively short period of time, came out as the tiger of Europe. Why? They had high-skilled workforce, a productive workforce, they had a low tax rate, good infrastructure, excellent language skills. Just to point out as well, in terms of language skills, you don't have to speak Italian or French or English. The Romanians speak all those languages. I'll give you, in my office, I'd say 90% of the people don't speak 2 languages, they speak 3 languages fluently. And they never left, some have never even left the country. So the language skill is a big plus. If you see a lot of the time in terms of the businesses that are being set up here, a lot of call centers, if you want to give a good example of productivity and good, attractive wages, call centers are being set up. Why? The language skills are excellent. You don't have the cultural aspect. Sometimes there's a bit of criticism when you have call centers based in India. And they're being set up at good, attractive wages. So that's something that is actually moving very well. So I think moving forward, you have to take sort of the larger perspective of Romania, where the direction is going. Despite some of the criticism, I think there's been government policies that have been criticized, and we in the AmCham and Coaliția have been vocal about that criticism. My overall view is Romania is heading in the right direction. Given the historical context of the country and what Romania has gone through over the last 25 years, it is a positive direction. There's going to be bumps in the roads. Some of these bumps are going to be a little bigger than others, but nonetheless, the direction is the right one. And I think we, as a business community that have been operating on the market for so many times, I think we've been fairly active. I think we've been very vocal, and we are engaged in a constant dialogue, and the government has been engaged in dialogue as well. I think the speedy reaction could be better. I think the period of notification, some of the changes in the laws could be longer, but they are actively engaging with the business community. So I think that's a positive trend.
Okay, thanks very much. And again, I would completely subscribe your comments, both comments on human capital in the country. That is definitely a very big advantage as a destination of investment. And talking about destination of investments, Jonas, you mentioned already some data about foreign direct investment, and you mentioned the upward trend in the last couple of years after a period of crisis. If you like, can you give us a bit of of more granularity in your analysis of those investments, because if I look at the data from the National Bank, for example, through the overall flow of foreign direct investment, so including reinvestment of profits, etc., is on an upward trend, but the greenfield investment in the country stay at a very meager level, below 100 million euros over the last 4 or 5 years, actually. And last year was 78 million euros, which is something not tenable for a country like Romania.
There are a lot of investments that are actually complementing the investments being made some years before. Automotive sector is one of them that really marked a significant growth of investments. I would say the IT sector, especially in the shared delivery centers, Romania probably is one of the, as you well know, that's why I mentioned about 6% going to 12% of GDP. There are big investments being done in the IT sector. I would say agriculture, because there are funds coming. There are many investors interested in acquiring, companies that are being set up in Romania, and some of them are quite, I would say, very successful. And you can see that actually, if you look at the span of the industries in Romania, agriculture, but not the production in itself, because still a lot of population works in agriculture, but the organized big companies that are actually taking advantage of consolidating the land into one single place. And last but not least, I would say energy and oil. We have the big developments on the Black Sea platforms, which attracted a lot of investments. It was this downside because of the oil price, which slowed down a bit the volume of investments, but this really triggered a big attention from the investor side. And last but not least, I would mention about the defense industry, which now seems to attract a lot of investments, as you well know. It's not about only buying equipment from abroad, but actually producing equipment in Romania, which means revitalizing the defense industry in Romania. So this would be more or less my comments about.
Okay. George, do you see any potential for cross-border investments in the region?
Yes, sure. And the aspect I would like to emphasize on is not to focus only on the fact that new investment is not coming in the country, because indeed Romania is behind into this. But let's see also what is happening with companies that have been established here, companies that came with a pilot of 100 employees and now they have more than 2,000. Let's see with big structures and big companies, or individuals also, that once they come in the country, they come with very low expectations, but while they get to know the country, understand the potential, they love it. We were talking just during the break with a colleague that we were talking about an ex-GSK executive that was here. He had his mandate and he thought of leaving, and he's been here for decades now. And those stories are so many of them. People coming here for a few years, they say, okay, I'm going to have a mandate, do a mission, and then go back home, and they stick to the country. And this says something. This is not a coincidence. And this is happening both on an individual level, also on a corporate level. So beyond the bad brand image of the country, beyond the bad work that the country is doing for the branding of itself, and the regional role that it can play, let's listen to the people that have been here, have done this, and have real-life examples about what the country can really do.
And rather, what can the country do to improve that brand image?
Well, it's been mentioned, in terms of brand image, the Romanians have been less successful at sort of promoting the opportunities that exist in Romania. I think that, the actions speak louder than words. I think that's a very important thing, because, if you look at CNN, you have all these kind of branding of countries that are being promoted all back and forth. There's no substance to it. I think the substance is in the real life stories. I think that, for those in the IT sector, we talk about IT as being a main focus for Romania. The fact is, Microsoft, IBM, Oracle, all these American companies have very solid presence in this country with research centers in this country. It's not by accident. It's not by accident. In terms of real life story, I can give you one very good example. There's a startup in the United States. It's out of New York. It's called Point Pickup. It's a business, kind of an Uber for delivery. It's a last mile delivery company. It is rolling out a national platform for one of the largest retailers in the United States. The technology was built from scratch in Romania. Now, if you want to look at that in terms of standards, those are international standards, very, very high standards, all being done in Romania. These are small, these are secrets basically that are not being told by the Romanian government. So rather than talk about the statistics that we mentioned about the GDP growth, the low GDP debt, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, these are real life examples of what's taking place in the country. There's another example in Western Romania. There's a large retail operation that was recently, I think the recent transaction was 13 to 14 times EBITDA. That's significant. So there's outside funds, there's a lot of cheap money. Everyone knows there's a lot of cheap money outside of Romania. A lot of funds are looking at these things, and they're seeing the opportunity in Romania. Healthcare sector, which is a sector that's not been mentioned, the prognosis is 3 times in terms of the growth where it stands today. It's forecasted to grow 3 times what it is in the next couple of years. So there's a lot of opportunity, there's a lot of good stories that are simply not being told. So rather than focus on the macro situation, no offense to my colleagues and yourself as well, Matteo, with all the stats, let's talk about the actual real life businesses that are transacting, what's taking place in the market. That is the best way to communicate.
Yeah. And again, on a longer term basis, and you kind of hinted at that in your first intervention, I'm personally convinced that the entire region has a very significant room for potential for growth and development. And the convergence potential, as Jonas also mentioned, is there, and I don't believe that Romania will need 40 years to get to the Europe average. If some actions will be done, how do you see that path, and which actions do you think need to be done?
Well, we need to make up our mind and to really move from the short-term kind of strategies to medium to long-term. We need to have what we called in AmCham a project called Romania, where we put all resources and energies and minds together and aim for a long-term strategy rather than immediate results. One of the projects that I believe the most about Romania, which will really accelerate the development of the country and maximize its potential and provide tremendous opportunities for investors, is the Laser Valley, the Măgurele project. It's a project that, as it is outlined now, and do have, World Bank funds, or it's willing to put money in to get the feasibility study done. It's a 1.5 billion US dollars. It can turn what France did in Bordeaux, if I'm not mistaken, more than a decade ago. And it's about infrastructure. It is about research and development, one that Romania really needs. It's about, getting all resources together to make Romania one of the biggest, let's say, the tigers of Southeast Europe. That is one of the projects I truly believe in. The second project it's a project that has been discussed a lot. Investments are there, the Black Sea Gateway, to transform it. Right now, Europe is really suffocated by the amount of trade done through the Rotterdam Gate. So to bring all the goods and merchandises from, the Netherlands down south will take a lot of time. Now, Constanța is an alternative to that. But again, it's not about the current government. It's about us as a country to understand how important such a program is, to make it work, and to allocate constant resources so that these 2 projects will come through. That is, in my view, 2 significant projects with impact at all levels in our society.
George, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, the point is that in terms of government policy, I think there has been so much work done, and there has been so many people from Romania and from abroad consulting, advising Romanian what is the right thing to do, that if somebody tomorrow would really want to implement, would really have the political will to implement it, he would perfectly know what needs to be done. But beyond governments and beyond things that we cannot control, we always prefer, especially medium-sized businesses, to focus on the things we can control. And what I see here is the role of the private sector. And the private sector in Romania is growing immensely in all the sectors, including very much regulated sectors like telecoms, energy, and healthcare. Healthcare is growing, the private healthcare sector is growing rapidly. It's doubling actually its size every year nowadays. So the private sector can play a role. And we are living in a world where, out of the Economist data, 69 out of the 100 biggest economic entities in the world are private. So out of the 100 biggest economic entities in nowadays world, only 31 are states and 69 are corporations. So the power of the corporate world, big size, medium size, and even small size, in making a change, driving a difference, doing investments, and getting the people along and doing the right thing, I think is immense. And the nice thing with Romania is that the people are listening, the people are willing to change, the people are resilient, and we have so many success stories that I think we can simply multiply them and drive Romania to the right direction.
I fully subscribe to that. If I look at the experience of BRD in Romania, for example, this year, our entire business is focused on the private sector because that's where we see actually fertile ground in growing the economy and developing the country and taking the country to the next level. But rather, again, you cover 11 countries, and so you know Southeastern Europe very well. What role can play Romania in terms of regional integration, and which projects do you think should be fostered in order to integrate the entire region much better than it is now?
I mean, the obvious answer to why Romania is the hub, we are a hub for all these 11 countries. It's not by accident. The reason being Romania is the biggest market. It is the fastest growing market. There's a lot of talk about the growth potential. You know, whenever we look in terms of, I'm speaking purely from perspective of hubbing, you know. So you want to be, you usually fish where the fish are. Romania being the country, the biggest potential by sheer population, GDP growth, et cetera. That's the obvious choice. If I look in terms of Croatia and Serbia and Serbia have similar problems to Romania. Labor laws that are somewhat restrictive. There's a big difference here. Romania's unemployment rate is relatively low. I think it's around 4%, if I'm not mistaken. Right. Croatia and Serbia, even though Croatia is an EU member, Serbia is not, although a candidate probably after 2020, the unemployment rate is up to 20%. So I think in the case of Croatia, the problem with Croatia, it's a smaller, much smaller market, I think 4 million people. You could make an argument in many ways the infrastructure is much better, but being a much smaller country, I think they've been more successful in absorbing the funds. Serbia, much less so. The war in Serbia, the 90s, threw that country back at least 30 years. And there's a big frustration. If I talk to the people that work with us in Serbia, there's a tremendous frustration. Say, how is it that we were the most advanced, arguably one of the most advanced countries prior to the war in Eastern Europe, and now we're in one of the last place in terms of the statistics. So there's big frustration. So I think that looking forward after 2020, because the wages in both Serbia and Croatia are more attractive in some ways. You also have to think forward. Matteo said in sort of my Wall Street thinking, we usually buy when we think things look terrible and we sell when things look great. Serbia could be an opportunity moving forward. But that question still remains a question. They're not in the EU yet. And as I mentioned before, investors want that security and peace of mind of being an EU member state, NATO member state that plays a very important role in terms of decisions. So in terms of the integration, I'm not sure. I think that there's been, in terms of local companies, what I've observed over the years, there's not many Romanian-based companies that expand beyond the borders of Romania. There's a few examples, and I think that's a problem. Now, you can argue, and I think that's true of Croatia, Serbia, and the other countries. So you have to sort of think, all these companies in their mindset, do they feel uncomfortable operating outside of their own sort of own turf? And I think that's always a big question I've always asked. Whereas you have the international companies here, they've expanded operations. I know that there are companies, Procter & Gamble is one example. Their hub is in Bucharest. They expand all over the Balkans, and they're not the only ones. So the reasoning behind choosing Romania, I think, is very clear. In terms of the integration in how we export those services or products outside of the borders, I think that question is still unanswered. I couldn't give you a sort of a firm explanation of what are the real reasons what are the opportunities that you have being based in Romania, looking outside the region. We're a service-oriented business, so we're dealing with intangibles. So for us, when we provide campaigns or communication platforms for the region, we can adapt according to local cultures, expectations, adapt messages accordingly. But when you're talking on a product, what is the demand of the product from outside Romania? Those are sort of simple, basic questions you ask when you start talking about integration as a whole.
Okay. Maybe one of the, I totally agree that the integration of the economies driven by the private sector are a bit of an issue and a bit of an unknown yet. And probably there is a bit of a diversified scenario there, because indeed the Romanian companies tend to be a little bit less ambitious than they could be. Even big companies, the 800 million, 100 billion, 1 billion turnover companies, that instead of, when they have saturated the market here in Romania, instead of going abroad and trying to conquer other markets, the shareholders tend to diversify their investment in other sectors rather than doing that. So there is a bit of a lack of ambition. In terms of integration in the private sector in other countries like Croatia, Serbia, I was in Serbia before coming to Bucharest. I see more of an integration. And at some point, the Economist was talking about Yugosphere, which was an economic reinterpretation of Yugoslavia. And indeed, actually, we have seen also the negative effects of that now with the spillovers of the insolvency and the bankruptcy of Agrokor, which is affecting the entire value chain in the Western Balkans. But in the public sector, I think a lot can be done there in order to integrate the infrastructure, transport infrastructure, energy infrastructure, take the Brua gas pipeline, or indeed motorways, and the connection between Romania and Bulgaria is now great. And how do you see that? Is that going anywhere? Is there anything that can be done? Do you think EU can play a role there? The question for the three of you.
I will say I fully agree with you that if you compare Romania with its big potential and the size of the market with the other countries in the region, Slovenia, Croatia, they have big brands that people heard of. Agrokor used to be one of them until they faced the issues. Mercator, Podravka, Gorenje. So people in the room did hear about them. Now, not much about the Romanian brands per se, but yet I have experience and I've seen companies the telecom, RCS, RDS is present in the Balkans very well, and even more. I would say that EMAG, for those who don't know, is present in Bulgaria, is present in Poland, in Hungary, and they have a business model. It's about the business model, how successful that is. I'm not here to do advertising, but I know, for example, Dedeman. It's growing significantly. Romania will be filled with Dedeman, so then they have enough resources to move outside. Now, is it good or is it bad? Well, the thing is that in Romania, they maximize the market potential, and Romania is a big market. Now, I do see them accumulating that level of wealth and experience, expertise to run outside the country successful businesses. Some of them tried, unfortunately tried in the wrong part of the world, in Ukraine and Russia, and the results were not very good. And they pull back in the country and learn again how to do it. But I would say that from this perspective, what I did see is that Romania serves as a hub for the other territories in the region, even though, like I said, Croatia is there. But just serves as a hub because in terms of human resources, proved to be the one they can rely the most. What I see a lot of potential is about digitization. Both first of Romania, because surprisingly, though Romania is one of the most advanced in terms of skilled IT labor force, in terms of plans, ideas. By the way, you have some of the most renowned IT investors around the globe that are based here, one of them being Radu Georgescu, who makes business after business with brilliant ideas in this market. So digitization of the country, could serve as a great platform on spilling over the other countries in our region. And you'll see there are certain initiatives I'm aware of. We, PwC, are going to release very soon a report on the digitization of Romania compared to the other countries and how this will impact Romania and the other countries when Romania is supposed to take action, is one of the areas which I believe the most that Romania can make a difference. Now, how will that difference be made? It's hard to say for the time being, but I tell you, and I dare to put a coin as a bet that Romania will do much better in the next 5-10 years in terms of investing outside Romania than they did so far.
Okay, that's very encouraging. George and Radu, would you like to add anything to this?
I'm personally fully covered by Ionuț. The only thing that I would like to stress out would be that the whole market, the size of the whole market might be an explanation itself. So it's a self-explainable paradox, the fact that Romanians haven't gone abroad because there was so much room to cover in Romania. And secondly, sometimes Western people, we are expecting things to happen fast. So everybody was expecting that 2004 joining NATO, 2007 joining EU, 2008 would be fine, it would be great. So change sometimes lasts and hurts and costs, and this process is still going on, and we all feel that the rule of law is getting more solid. We all feel that the free market principles are being lived and experienced by Romanian people. So I think we are in front of many, many more surprises, more than the one that Ionuț already mentioned, because Romania has it.
I will just want to add one thing, because I missed that, but I think I filled in it. Romania is the most pro-American, as a population. Yeah. I see it's in their blood, in their fingers. If you go in the countryside, they are so much in favor of that. And probably this comes with the language skills, this comes with the friendliness of the people, just willing to, get things done. So that is one of the strengths of the Romanians, which, like he said, when you come first time, I do have clients of mine saying, I've been seconded to Romania. I don't know what I did wrong, but I have to come to this country. But then, after their mandate, when their mandate comes to an end, they say, what do I have to do to stay longer? How can I work around? How can I make, come up with a new idea to make this investment bigger so that they need me, I can stay here more. And I felt the need to say that because it's important. Absolutely. We talk here about investments in Romania. You have a fertile soil for fostering such investments.
Absolutely, and it's a source of great stability. Radu?
Just to add, I totally agree with my colleagues on the perspective. I think it's very simple. Romania is the largest country. It has a lot more. There's a lot more potential, and there's a lot more things to do here. So just from a business perspective, I look at the different areas, and we are very much a mirror image of the interests of our clients. So the clients are very clear about it. The focus is on Romania. Yes, we can't ignore these other markets, but the focus is still on Romania. Why? Because there's still tremendous potential in this country. And given the market size, and you've seen the statistics in terms of, Serbia, Croatia, Slovenia, which I cover as well, they're relatively smaller, much smaller markets. So just from a business perspective, it makes sense to focus and fish where the fish are, rather than start focusing on too many markets when there's still a lot more to do in this place.
Okay, thanks very much. I would open the floor to questions from the audience. Any question?
Mr. Ambassador will have a question.
Thank you, panel. Excellent discussion. And I'm sorry, I came in a little bit late, so excuse me if I'm asking a question that was covered earlier in your discussion, but just curious about your views on the role of infrastructure in both ensuring the long-term not only viability, but the sustainability of economic growth here in Romania, but then also as a means of binding Romania to its neighborhood. And, and in terms of infrastructure, and I take your point very importantly, it's not just the government, it's really the country that needs to wrestle with this, this objective. But what is your prognosis for Romania to be able in the next 5 to 10 years to lay down the infrastructure needed not only to ensure economic sustainability here in Romania, so highways, railways, the digital networks that are necessary, the energy networks that are necessary, the ports that are necessary, both sea but then also airports. We all know that Henry Coanda is essentially maxed out now, and I guess there is a plan to break ground on a new terminal, but how soon will that come online? So what is your estimate of the local ability to respond to these infrastructure needs? And then also any the thoughts you might have on how the international community might help. And in this regard in particular, there is this initiative that's begun a couple years ago, the so-called 3 Seas initiative, Baltic, Black, and Adriatic Seas. An idea of working together with international partners to build out infrastructure in all these areas, transportation, energy, and digital across the eastern flank of the transatlantic community. So, thank you.
Janusz,
I can start, but I always had the floor and I have plenty to say. And
So I'll do your intro then, Yunus. I think from a historical perspective, the infrastructure was, I think in the 90s, no one paid any attention to it. I think there was a political decision that they didn't want to develop the infrastructure. That's just my personal point of view. I think from American perspective, you can look at very easily. Look at the Eisenhower administration. After the war, the United States took a very firm decision to build on the infrastructure. It wasn't an easy pill to swallow, but the long-term benefits were clear. And building the highways throughout the United States, everyone understood the long-term perspective. There's been a lack of will in this country to take that bitter pill. It's actually, the decision's quite easy. There's EU funds available. They have been available. They've not been absorbed. So the question remains, is the government willing to take that step, and it's an important step, to build that infrastructure? That's been a question we as business people have been asking from, right from the day one. So I think that's the obvious advantages of building up the infrastructure, lower transport costs. If you look at Hungary, despite some of the political issues that they have, the road network is excellent. It's interconnected to the rest of Europe, easy to move goods and services anywhere you want at any time. And once you get to the border of Romania, it just stops cold. So, the issue of infrastructure, no one is debating and no one is questioning the need for infrastructure. It's a political will that has to be there in order to take that big step forward. In terms of the cooperation, I mentioned earlier the Irish example. One of the things that they had that made Ireland such an attractive place, they had a very good cooperation with the government, the business community, and labor. And that is something that we've been trying to push through AmCham, and not only, in trying to get a cooperation, understanding a positive and attractive business environment, as I outlined before. Not just the small steps, as the short-termers, that's the disease, the short-termism decisions that are sometimes taken, but an active, long-term partnership between the labor, the government, and the business community.
If I may add to that, I think, Ambassador, we had a number of discussions about the position of the BRD with regard to the infrastructural gap in the country and the efforts that we try to put in place to no avail whatsoever in order to foster the development of infrastructure in the country and integration of infrastructure together with other countries, neighboring countries, for example, in the energy sector. I think there is even a bigger issue. I think that there is a need to change the paradigm of economic growth in the country, which should shift from a consumption-driven one to an investment-driven one. And when the public administration and the succession of governments will understand that, then we will see gathering momentum in the development of infrastructure in the country. Please, go ahead.
Okay, I will look at the glass half. I will start by saying the half-empty glass is that our infrastructure is not good at all. It's actually terrible. If you look at the number of kilometers of highways per capita, you don't want to know. But the half-full glass is that there are tremendous opportunities to get this right. When it comes to, and I'm not going to talk only about highways and this kind of roads infrastructure, because this is one of those that people are aware of. And I like to think that we are actually accumulating. There are a lot of talks about it. Every government says that. So we are not talking about one government did that or another government did the other thing. They are all aware of the fact that they need to put the money in. So we need money. But if it will be up to me, and probably I like to think that at a point in time there will be this discussion, we will restart it. To get the money, we need either the banks, and the banks are ready. I understand you have the money. What you miss are the projects that, are good enough to generate the money to be paid back. So the banks, we have the European Union funds, but for this, again, we need the projects, and we need the management authorities capable of absorbing this money. And I hope that now we enter into a period of stability, political stability, which will give the possibility to generate or attract those money with viable projects. But then there is one thing that we all know, and I put the ball in my yard. It is about the money we paid as taxes and social contributions. The best investment one can do right now, the government, will be to modernize our tax administration. We collect around, actually less than 30% of our revenues to the state budget to GDP. The average in European Union is 42 to 44%. You know how much 1% means? It means 1.7 billion euros money to the state budget. So if we can increase the level of collection of taxes, not more taxes, don't get me wrong. It is about collecting the taxes that we all pay, because only few pay taxes, and usually these are the companies that are actually even targeted for more taxes to be paid. So if I will give an advice to the current government, is to please focus on the modernization of Romanian tax administration. The studies show that in Bulgaria, where this happened about a decade ago, even though it was not completed in full, led to a 3 to 5% growth of the collection of revenues to the state budget. If we will collect 5% more taxes to the state budget of the money that are paid in the system, then I tell you this means 10 billion euros per annum. Can you imagine what can we do with 10 billion euros? We can easily finalize some of the big infrastructure projects. On some others, like the Laser Valley, which, Mr. Ambassador, I know you are aware of, should that project come into place, will connect north of Bucharest, Anricoada Airport, with the south of Bucharest. And Măgurele, being in the south of Bucharest, is very close to the former Danube-Bucharest channel. And that can be also revitalized, because it's whatever, 60, 70%, used to be even more, but because the investments were not there, we lost track. So yes, the investment, there are huge opportunities there. Yes, we need help from international investors, people that can, make their idea, turn those ideas into real projects. The private-public partnership should make it work, and that is one of our biggest weaknesses. In 27 years, we were not able to make this piece of legislation work, for whatever, good reasons, bad reasons. So if we get few of these things done, modernize Romanian tax administration, set this management authority in order to be able to truly absorb the money from the European Union, come with projects that will be bankable, or the banks will be willing to put the money in, these are the things that need to be done. Not to, like we think, to have the government doing the highways.
Yeah, but in order to get these things done, you need to change the mind of the government, whatever government it is. And that comes with a different economic agenda.
Yeah. On the modernization of tax administration, it's just a matter of will. It's nothing more than it. We don't have to change anything.
But also building infrastructure is a matter of build.
Yeah.
Well, it's like any company. Listen, you always look at a company, and the first thing you do is, when you analyze a company, is look at the management, the same issue. So if you believe in the management, then you believe in the company, then you might consider buying stocks or whatever.
Yeah. So I don't know whether we answered, Mr. Ambassador, to your question, but I know that the modernization of tax administration is high on the agenda of all people that are interested in the welfare of the country. So,
George.
Two more comments, if I may. Number one, the huge discrepancy between the infrastructure in the digital economy and the classical infrastructure is a proof that the private sector, when it is allowed to do stuff, it does great. Because nowadays, Romania is number one in Europe in terms of internet speed. Romania, in the total Europe, not Southeast Europe, not Central Eastern Europe, in the total Europe, has the fastest access to internet throughout the continent. And this is because the private sector, of course, did the investment that they're doing. It was allowed, actually, to do the investment. Now, given this, and of course, given the big issue we have with the classical infrastructure and the road system and the highways, however, we need to consider that there is a lot of industries for whom this kind of classical highways is irrelevant. There is a lot of things happening today in the digital world where this is irrelevant. Let's take a young person in Cluj who wants to make a career and just takes the plane with a low-cost airline. He can be anywhere in Europe, and every day or every night he can connect all over the world. And he's doing business, he's creating software, he's making friends, he's making connections. He's a citizen of the world because he has the highest possible connection, internet speed in Europe out of Cluj. So yes, of course we need roads, but let's not underestimate the fantastic progress that has been done in this digital part in Romania by the private sector.
Absolutely. I think we have time for just one other question. Or you want to shut us down now?
Yes.
Just one question, maybe. Yes.
Sorry, just a quick question, please, from DC comment. Washington. How does the private sector here in Romania sees the geopolitical developments here in the region? Thank you.
Who wants to take this one?
I can go first, saying that Romania is the safest place in this region.
Yeah, I would second that. I mean, again, it's a psychological perspective. Romania's EU member state, NATO. I think the security cooperation between the United States and Romania is excellent, and I think people have noted that. There's been, in terms of the geopolitical situation, if you look at our neighbors, you could arguably say that Romania, despite some of the grievances we may have, it's a little less attractive in terms of the political situation, both Hungary and Poland. The Polish situation, the issue of the judiciary, Hungary with Orban as prime minister, that has been making international press. So I think there's been less news about that in Romania for good reason. I think that despite the local issues that we've had, the overall picture, and as I go back to my statement before, the direction is still very positive. So I think people feel comfortable about coming here. I think they feel comfortable about doing business here. Just one little statistic, 10 years ago at Otepeni Airport, the traffic, comparatively speaking, the traffic was 10% of the traffic going into Budapest. Today, it's the same. So now we finally have a reason to confuse Budapest and Bucharest. But nonetheless, the secret is out. Romania is not so much of a secret anymore. People see the opportunity, and they see people coming in. And the traffic coming in and out of the Otepeni Airport is a good indication of how things are developing.
But I think that geopolitical stability is a common feature of the entire region, really, because if you look at south of Romania or west of Romania, the Western Balkans are, with very few exceptions, are generally going in the right direction. Even Serbia, which is possibly accessing the EU after 2020, is on a path to reform, leaving aside Croatia and Slovenia, which are very, 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 very stable. Bulgaria is a very stable place. So I would think that the entire region actually is a champion of stability from a geopolitical standpoint. Then if you go into micropolitics, it's a different matter.
I will add only one thing. If one can answer how come in a country with these political debates and disputes, the economy grows with more than or close to 6%, then one answer stays in the stability of the macroeconomic systems in the country and around the country. So I do think there are good prospects. So,
okay, I think we need to close it here. Joshua?
Panelists and moderator, thank you again for your time, for your very fruitful discussion. Mr. Ambassador, thank you for the question. I think we need to dedicate the next conference on transportation and infrastructure. The ambassador mentioned earlier in his remarks that one of his priorities is a vibrant democracy. And one key to any democracy is the right and the privilege to free and open protests. As you're exiting today, getting on the bus to the lunch, you will see peaceful demonstrations that are taking place. They are taking place regarding wage laws and increase of wages for the medical sector. Please don't be alarmed. They're not related to trade winds. They're not related to the U.S. government. They're not related to U.S. guests. So please be aware of that. Everyone is peaceful out there. Cheer them on if you are in agreement with them. I'll have no comment on that. But I look forward to seeing you at the lunch.